Hi everyone, today I'm going to be making test candles for CandleScience's new fall holiday fragrance lineup. Now, if you haven't checked out those fragrance oils already or haven't seen any marketing emails sent to your inbox, let me tell you real quickly what those 7 new scents are. Campfire Marshmallow, Orchard Pear, Black Cardamom and Cream, Persimmon Citron, Red Berry Balsam, Vanilla Eggnog, and Woodland Snow. Now it's 7 different scents, but I'm actually going to be making 14 test candles. I'm going to be doing 2 of each scent, one in a 9-ounce straight-sided jar, which is a roughly 7-ounce candle, and another in a 8-ounce square mason jar, which is another about 6-ounce candle, 6 or 7-ounce candle, depending on how much you fill it. I think we're going to go ahead and use some dye too and color these up just to make it a little bit more interesting, have a little bit more fun, and it'll be easier to tell them apart. Plus, I like to experiment with some colors while I'm also experimenting with fragrance oils in case I decide to move forward with a fragrance oil. That way I already know some colors that might already work for me. So with that being said, let's go ahead and flip this camera around so we can just get right into the making. I'm going to make these candles with you. Some of the process will speed up so it doesn't take as long. I've already got the wax melting behind me. And I should mention that the wax we're going to be using today is my favorite baseline testing wax, which is ProBlend 600. I like that wax because it's middle of the road in pretty much everything. Hot throw, cold throw, color, wicking, melt point. It's just a kind of good all-around wax, and I think it serves as a really good baseline. And I just enjoy using that wax in general. After I make these candles with you, I'm going to let them set for a few days, and then I'm also going to test them and let you know in this same video how the wicking was and how the hot throw was, and basically my overall feedback on all these fragrances. And before we get started, if you are new to this channel, my name is Wade. I'm the owner of Black Tie Barn, and I obviously run this YouTube channel, which is dedicated to other candle makers. It's all about candle making and selling candles, running a small business, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in more videos and want to check out all the previous videos and future videos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel below, give this video a thumbs up, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we've got our 7 jars lined up here. We've got our 7 masons and our 7 straight-sided jars. I'm gonna go ahead and push them out of the way so we can start with our wicks. So the 2 wicks we're gonna use for the testing in this video are 2 wicks that I know are pretty close with most scents with this wax and this size of jar. So we're gonna start with some Premier 730s in these straight-sided jars, and we're gonna use some Eco 1s in these mason jars. So let's go ahead and get the rest of the wick tabs placed on real quick. What's nice about this wax is there's a lot of wicks that do work pretty well. So there's a wide range of wick families that do a pretty good job, but I'm gonna go ahead and stick with the Premier 700 series and the Eco series. Now that we've got our wicks done, I'm gonna go ahead and put on the gloves. I like to put the wick tabs on before I do gloves because the gloves sometimes stick to the little stickers, so. So as I mentioned, we don't really need to label these jars because I'm gonna know the fragrance which is in which jar, and we're using only 2 types of wicks, one type of wick in one type jar, another type of wick in the other jar. So we're just gonna go ahead and get all these wicks set in place. By the way, if you're curious where I get these wick setters and the wick clips that you're going to see later in this video, I will have them all linked in the description below, as well as some other supplies that we're going to be using in today's video as well. But you can get these wick setters and the wick clips specifically for every jar that you probably use. All right, so we've got all of our wicks done. We're going to go ahead and push these jars out of the way. Okay. We've got our wicks placed, we've got our scale ready. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the scale. So in this test, I'm gonna do a 9% fragrance load. We're gonna do about 6 ounces in this jar, about 5 or so in this jar, which is about 11 ounces of wax, and 9% of that is 1 ounce. The reason I'm doing that is these are 1 ounce samples, so I wanted to use a full 1 ounce for the testing purposes. So we will have a total fill of 12 ounces. We're gonna put roughly 6 ounces in each one of these jars. So let's go ahead and smell Campfire Marshmallow. I've never opened any of these before, first time for me as well. What's kind of interesting about this is the very first time I pulled it to my nose, I smelled the marshmallow, and then I came back for a second whiff and I got the campfire, which is good because I'm getting multiple notes. And then the third time, it kind of brings it all together. It's got some of those fireside or smoky undertones and obviously some of that vanilla. Now, one thing to note is this does have a vanillin content of more than 5%, so that will cause some yellowing, some discoloration, so just keep that in mind. It's usually better to color your candles with some dye to help kind of mitigate that a little bit. But it's totally optional. You don't have to. But don't be surprised if you do see this tarnish or yellow a little bit on you as it sets. Speaking of colors, I'm going to be using their dyes as well. These are their new dyes, and if you're interested, they are REACH compliant. I'm going to try maybe a drop of cream and a drop of golden honey and see if we can kind of come up with that roasted marshmallow color. But let's go ahead and get our wax. Okay, so we've got our 11 ounces of wax, and the temperatures we're going to work with are going to be fairly low with this wax because we're working with a small amount of wax. We don't need a ton of time to incorporate all of the oil. Now, a laser thermometer, if you're not aware, works just fine in small batches. It does only measure surface temperature, but with small batches, it's okay. Just give it a little bit of a stir and then you'll get a pretty good reading. Otherwise, I like to use probe thermometers. They're just more accurate. So let's go ahead and add a drop of cream. Now, I like to use paper or wax coated plates to get an idea of what the color will look like once it's solidified. And so that does have a nice little cream, but I think we're going to add 1 drop of the golden honey as well to try to richen it up just a little bit. Add a little bit of brown. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's not great. We're going to go ahead and roll with it though. And I'll show you what these all look like when they're done as well. We're going to go ahead and add our fragrance oil, and we need 1 ounce, which should be this full bottle, but I'm going to weigh it just in case. We're going to give it a good stir. Now, one comment or question that sometimes get in these videos is that I'm stirring either too quickly or not long enough, but keep in mind that for the sake of time in the videos, I do speed up a lot of the process, and I also edit out some of it as well. So just keep that in mind whenever I'm doing some of this. All right, let's go ahead and pour this. Kind of looks like a tea color right now. Now we're not going to get a full amount of these candles, but we are just trying to use up the oil that we do have. And so it'll be close enough, especially for testing purposes. So we're going to go ahead and put our wick clips on. We're going to use the red for the Masons and these charcoal ones for the straight-sided jars. All right, future weight here. I decided I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I originally planned. I thought at first I was going to do all the testing out of the bottle, let you know my initial thoughts, make all the candles, and at the end of the video, the second half of the video, I would talk about each of them as far as how they burned, the hot throw, my overall feedback. But instead, I want to mix it up a little bit differently. Let's do each scent one at a time. So I just started with Campfire Marshmallow and gave you my initial feedback, showed you making the test candles. Now let's talk about how it performed, and then I will go through the same process with the remaining scents. So we're going to talk about 1 scent at a time. I feel like that might just flow a little bit better for you. So let me know if you prefer this format versus the other testing formats I've done in the past when I'm doing fragrance reviews. Let me know in the comments. Anyways, let's talk about Campfire Marshmallow. The first thing I would say is that I did enjoy it. It's definitely more campfire or fireside than it is marshmallow. There is a little bit of sweetness there. There's a little bit of that vanilla marshmallow fragrance. But if you are someone who's preferring more marshmallow, more sweet, more vanilla, then you might be disappointed. However, if you prefer more campfire or fireside, then I think you might like this one. What I do like about this, for those of you that are kind of put off by the very pungent fireside smell, then you'll like this because it is a little bit softer. I would say this one's a little bit more balanced. So from that perspective, it's pretty good. This is a dupe of a very popular fragrance by a big box brand. And I would say that this is somewhere in the middle of the ones that I've tested. I do wish there was a little bit more of a strong, I guess, marshmallow fragrance. So it really made you think of campfire marshmallow rather than just a campfire. For the color, I do wish I would have made it a touch more brown. If you saw in the final results, it's sort of an ivory cream color, which it was okay. It wasn't bad, but this is more golden honey. I think it needed a little bit more brown, which, by the way, and this goes for the rest of the scents as well, the colors are going to vary wildly depending on the type of wax you're using. If you're using a paraffin, it's going to be more vibrant. If you're using a soy, it's going to be more opaque. If you're using a parasoy, it'll be somewhere in the middle like I am here. So these are just kind of giving you my feedback from the testing in my candles, but it's going to vary based on your wax. The same goes for wicking, of course, and also hot throw. Speaking of hot throw, this fragrance had good hot throw. Hot throw is so subjective, so I hate kind of rating and talking about hot throw and cold throw too much with fragrances because it's so highly dependent on your wicking, the size of your jar, the type of wax you're using. We're all going to think very differently about hot throw. It's very subjective. But in my experience, this was pretty good. I would say this is a little above average. Again, testing in my situation. Overall, I would give this fragrance a 3 out of 5. Now, if you're not familiar with my scale, I like to use a scale of 1 through 5 because I find it's a little bit more direct and a little bit more concrete. There's less room for ambiguity. I used to do a 10-point scale and I found myself arbitrarily arbitrarily giving 1 scent a 7 versus an 8, and I couldn't really justify or explain why. There's just too many numbers. The scale was too large. And so what's the difference between a 5 and a 6, or a 6 and a 7, and a 7 and 8? Yeah, I don't know. Your guess was as good as mine, which is why I decided to shrink this down to 5. Very manageable rankings. So here's my scale in a nutshell. A 3 out of 5 is average, a 2 out of 5 is below average, and a 1 is not very good at all. 4 is above average, and 5 is superb. Now, I don't do a lot of 5s, and that's because I want to reserve that for scents that are so unique, so complex, ones that just knock me off my feet. And so I do try to reserve that. You'll see me mostly giving somewhere in the 2, 3, and 4 range when it comes to fragrances. If I have a super hard time deciding between a 3 and a 4, I will occasionally throw in the 3.5, but other than that, that's my scale. Just keep in mind that 3 is the average, and we kind of work around that. I would give this scent around a 3 or a 3.5 out of 5. Next up is Orchard Pear. I love pear and fruity scents. Believe it or not, fall is not one of my favorite time of years for candles. I know it's a really popular one, but I like summer and spring scents, and I like winter scents more than I do like fall. But I do like apple, I do like pear and fruit scents. It smells fairly similar to like an apple fragrance, but it definitely smells more like a pear than it does an apple, which you would hope so. It smells really good. This is my favorite of the 2 so far. Now in this case, because we're gonna potentially use some oranges or creams later, I don't wanna do another yellow. I'm gonna do a green for the pear. So I'm just gonna do 1 drop of lime green. Now while I'm stirring this and checking this color real quick, let's see how this color looks. Maybe we actually do 1 yellow and 1 green. These are just testers, so you can't do much damage, right? We're just experimenting here. Yeah, that'll work. I mean, it's definitely more green than I was kind of going for, but it will work. So let's go ahead and get our fragrance in. And while I'm doing that, a couple reasons I like to use these jars for testing purposes is, for starters, it uses the right amount of fragrance oil that I have on hand. These are 1 ounce samples. I can make 2 of these candles basically with 1 ounce of fragrance oil, but they're also kind of average size jars. Like, they're not huge diameters. They're not as small as little tins or tea lights, obviously. They're kind of in the middle. And so they're really popular sizes for a lot of candle makers to use, and I think they give a good baseline to judge fragrance throw from as well. So I like to mention that in some of these videos every once in a while, because some people are curious about why I chose these particular 2 jars. Let's go ahead and pour these 2. So you can see it's a little green. I would have preferred more of a greenish yellow, but I didn't want to spend too much time on this, so we can just get them poured. I still think it'll look really cool when it's done. And again, you really don't know till you try with the colors. You just gotta have fun, do a little bit experimenting. All right, same thing. We're gonna do charcoal lid on that one, and we're gonna do the red lid on this one. And they fit perfectly. Now this is one of the ones that I really did like out of the bottle, because I like fruity scents, I like outdoor scents, I like citrus scents, I like the smell of pear. And this one is in particular a very clean, true pear. This isn't mixed with anything else. It sort of reminds me of the Macintosh apple that CandleScience sells, in the fact that it's very true to its scent. Like, that's all you're getting, that's what you smell. You smell Macintosh apple, you smell pear. And so it's very similar in that regard. However, it's not as strong. Macintosh apple is a very strong fragrance. This Orchard Pear was moderately strong. I wish this scent was actually stronger though, because I did enjoy the scent. I needed a little bit more of it. As I mentioned, this is a just standard, clean, fresh pear fragrance. Now, I prefer the brandied pear from CandleScience personally, or at least the original one, although the new one's fine as well. But I find that scent much more interesting. It's always been a great seller for me. And so I like something added to the pear. So if I'm comparing this pear to that pear, they're very, very different. Very, very different. And I much prefer the other one. However, if you're looking for more of a fresh, clean, summery pear, then I think this one you might prefer. Personally, I think blending this with something, maybe a bourbon, maybe it's the brandied pear I'm thinking about, but maybe mixing this pear with a bourbon or a whiskey, and maybe you call it an orchard bourbon or an orchard whiskey or something like that. So you can get creative there, or maybe just mix it with some cinnamon or some kind of other, clove or other spice and call it spiced pear. The wicks were pretty good on this. And by the way, I should say that because I'm not going to talk about wicking too much. The wicks across the board were fine. The Eco 1 or 2, I think, is the right size for this wax with this fragrance load and these Masons, and the Premier 730 was right around the right range for most of these straight-sided jars with the same wax and fragrance. So if you happen to be using these same jars and the same wax, then that gives you a decent starting point. Of course, it will vary if you're using something totally different, but that's a good range to start with, and then you could tweak up or down from there as needed. And overall, I would give this about a 3. I would say this was about an average scent. I really like the scent. I do wish it was a little bit stronger though, and so for that reason, I'll just leave it at about a 3, about average. Next up is Black Cardamom and Cream. Now this is the type of fragrance that is sometimes pretty popular and a lot of people like it. It's not my type of scent. It's not a personal favorite of mine. I'm not big into the cardamom fragrance in general. I'm not real heavy into food type fragrances, which again is why fall is not one of my favorite scent seasons. Candle Science describes this as rich cream with black cardamom, cinnamon, and chestnut. I'm definitely smelling mostly chestnut and black cardamom. And it's okay, it's just not one of my personal favorites. That doesn't mean you won't like it, it's just not really in my wheelhouse. Once again, we are working with 11 ounces of wax. For this one, I want to go with kind of a smoky brown color. Again, it's black cardamom and cream. You could go with cream, you could go with gray, you could go with brown. We're gonna go with some kind of smoky brown color. So let's start with 1 drop of each. We're not working with a ton of wax here, right? So we don't need very many drops at all. In fact, some of these, like the pear, I would have preferred it was lighter, but we're working with a small amount of wax and I can't go less than 1 drop really, or at least easily. So 1 black and 1 brown. Let's see what we get here. That is actually kind of interesting. I think we might stick with that. I think we're gonna roll with that color. Let's go ahead and get our fragrance oil in. Now again, I'm working with a small amount of wax. I'm not having to incorporate a ton of oil into a lot of wax, making a huge batch size. So I can let this, wax get down to around 160 degrees, something like that, and get the fragrance oil, mix, for a minute or so, and then go ahead and pour the candles. We're working with quick, small amounts, quick period of time, and so it's fairly simple to do that. But of course, the type of wax you're using, the size of batch you're using, other variables, mostly the type of wax you're using, is going to control or dictate a lot of your process. And this is a really cool color. I like this. It's like a tobacco-ish color, actually. I don't know if tobacco is the right word to describe the color, but it's a cool color either way. Future weight here again. Let's talk about this black cardamom and cream. So out of the bottle, this was not one of my favorites. Straight cardamom is nothing I've been a huge fan of. I mean, it's a main ingredient in like chai tea, which I do like, but for some reason, cardamom by itself, I don't know, it's just never been great for me. It's just never been my cup of tea, so to speak. That was lame. But I gotta tell you, I like this one much better burning than I did out of the bottle. I was not sure. I don't even know if it was in my top 3 or 4, whatever, out of the bottle. But I would have to say this probably became my favorite one once I started using it. It filled the air great. It had good hot throw. The notes really came together much better when it was burning, and I just really enjoyed it. It sort of reminded me of being in a coffee shop and some kind of fun, nice coffee, chai, latte type drink, sort of. The cream really balanced out the cardamom. And that sweetness was just right. It wasn't too much of anything. So it was a very well-balanced scent. And I actually really enjoyed this one. In fact, when I was kind of done testing, I noticed I went back and burned this one more than the others. I also thoroughly enjoyed the color I went with. So it was sort of that kind of muted brownish black color. I thought that was a good choice, although there's a lot of options you probably could have went with this. It had a very good hot throw. So overall, I would give this one a 4 out of 5. Now again, for me, a 4 means it's a really good scent. So I really enjoyed it. I probably am going to be adding this or something similar to it to my candle line in the future because I did really enjoy this one and I don't have something quite like it. All right, next up we have Persimmon Citron. So this is gonna be pretty fruity. Oh, I really like that one a lot. You can definitely pick up on some of the orange zest, and it's got a little bit of that, what's that orange drink? Tang. It smells a little bit like Tang. I love citrus, I love orange, and this type of fragrance. Now, I have a lot of scents that are similar, so I don't know that I would necessarily incorporate this into my line because, again, there are many similar to this. So let's go ahead and get our wax. Okay, for this one, I think it makes sense. We need to come up with a good orangish color with maybe a hint of a pink or a magenta or something like that. So I ended up using 2 drops of orange and a drop of red, and it kind of gave us this cool peach color. So we're going to go ahead and roll with that. I went ahead and added the fragrance. Right now I'm just stirring it up and we're about to pour. This is a really nice color. I like this one a lot. All right, I'm back here to talk a little bit how the testing of Persimmon Citron went. Now, this was good. I do enjoy this fragrance because, as I mentioned before, I like citrus scents. I like outdoor summery type scents. Now, this one's different. It has a twist that makes it a little bit more fall or a little bit more holiday. And the best way I can explain that is think of your orange and your citrus scents, but mixed with a little bit of spice to make like a winter punch or a winter cider. So if you are familiar with wassail, in fact, Candle Science sells a wassail, They have a wassail fragrance in their line of fragrances, and that's basically a winter cider or a mulled wine. Think of it that way. It's got apples and oranges and other cinnamon and spices, and it makes that punch. This is sort of like that, and I think it's sort of what it's supposed to represent. However, it's not as spicy as wassail or as complex as wassail. I mostly get orange zest with this more than anything else, with a touch of spice. It's like an orange chili pepper from Nature's Garden, kind of reminds me of this a little bit, with maybe a little bit of wassail. When it's all burning together, it just smells sort of like an orange or an orange zest. If that's up your alley, then you'll really enjoy this. If you're looking for something that's got a little bit more going on, then I don't know that this is necessarily going to fit the bill, especially for the holidays. If you want something similar to this, but it's a little bit more holiday, I would probably stick with wassail. It did have pretty good hot throw, and overall, I'll give this a 3.5 out of 5. A little this is biased. I like this type of fragrance so much, and that's why it's getting a little bit bump. Otherwise, I'd probably give it around a 3, but it kind of depends on you. It's very personal, right? But I think a 3 to 3.5 on this fragrance out of 5 stars is pretty good. All right, next up, we have Red Berry Balsam. I like fragrances like this a lot. These kind of pine woodsy notes that have a little bit of a fruit or a spice or something as well. And that's pretty much what that smells like. With these woodsy scents, you definitely will pick up the balsam. I mean, there's no mistake in that. And then you get these other undertones, some of the fruitiness. It almost smells like a Christmas wreath type fragrance. I typically really do like these kind of fragrances, but it's not my favorite one so far today. With a fragrance like this, you could definitely go with a red color or a green color. We already have a green and we don't really have a red. So let's see if we can get a pretty good red color just to make this a little more interesting. And we'll see what we can do. It can be very challenging to come up with a good rich red, but let's see what we can accomplish. And I've always had better luck getting red with using magenta and orange versus just red. Red kind of makes more of a pink. So we're gonna add 1, 2, 3, 4 drops of magenta. And that's gonna give us a pretty, still pinkish color, at least to start with. You can see that there, really nice bright pink color. But we're not done. Now we're gonna bring in an orange. We're gonna start with 1. You could also use burgundies and other things to try to accomplish the same goal. But with previous dyes, I've had good luck with magenta and orange. And I don't really care what color of red this is, to be honest, because what we're going for is a red berry balsam. There's not a specific color that comes to mind. It can be anything you want. I'm actually gonna add another magenta. And you know, I think of red berries on the trees, they usually have a pink undertone as well. So we're gonna go ahead and ride with that. I changed my mind, we're gonna gamble here. I'm gonna add 1 more orange. So we ended up with 5 magentas and 2 oranges. And now we need to get our fragrance in there. Okay, I will say I already enjoy the smell of this one better once it's into the wax and I can just smell the natural aroma coming out versus just out of the bottle. Yeah, so adding that extra orange made it a little bit more of a darker, kind of deeper brick red color. Like I said, there's a flexibility here. You could have went with anything you want. We're all gonna do something a little bit different. Let's talk about this Red Berry Balsam. Now, I probably should have went more in depth on this one in the first part, but I gotta say, I haven't yet spoke to anyone that has liked this fragrance out of the bottle. I gotta be honest. There is something odd about it, something off. And when you smell it out of the bottle, I just don't care for it. It's very strange and it's hard to put your finger on it and explain, but I gotta tell you, I don't know anyone yet that actually liked this one out of the bottle. Because it's sort of got a pine fragrance, but I don't know if it's a berry or something else that's in it, but it just smells like odd. And I don't know. Again, I don't know how to explain it. But that being said, it did smell better when it was burning in the candle than it did out of the bottle, which is another lesson why you should never judge anything 100% out of the bottle. Give it a chance. And I did. It was better. Now, to me, it reminds me of like a mistletoe, mixed a little bit of a berry. Now, what kind of berry? I'm still not quite sure, but it has kind of a fruity tree fragrance or a fruity pine. So yeah, that's why I'm saying like a mistletoe mixed with some kind of berry or cherry. I prefer the other pine and fir and balsam type fragrances that CandleScience has over this one. And in particular, this is sort of similar to like a light version of Christmas Hearth, except for in my opinion, Christmas Hearth is one of the best fragrances that CandleScience carries. It's very strong, it's very complex, it screams Christmas, it's an awesome fragrance. And so I could never choose this one over that. You might like this one better for one reason or another, or maybe it just finds itself in addition to Christmas Hearth in your line of candles. But for me, it's a little too similar. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this. It was better than I thought it was going to be, but still just kind of average for me at best. The wicking was fine on it. Now, I did enjoy the color. It was sort of kind of a reddish with a touch of pink. I think that was a great color for this. So I was happy with that. And overall, I would give this for me, like a 2.5 out of 5. It was a little below average for my taste. Part of that is just because I couldn't get over that strange scent, that strange aroma that I was getting from it. And then the other biggest reason for me that it's under a 3 out of 5 is that it's kind of close. There's so many other great wood note fragrances that CandleScience sells that to me, this one's just not better than the majority of those. Okay, we have 2 left. Vanilla Eggnog. Now, out of all the bakery scents, this is my favorite so far. I smell more kind of smoky vanilla, almost like a cookie of some sort, but there is a little bit of that cinnamon, nutmeg. Again, I have other fragrances that smell like this. You likely do as well. So when you get a bunch of fragrances that are similar, it's more about choosing the one that you just like a little bit better than the other and which one performs the best hot throw, the one you could wick the easiest. And so if you're looking for another fragrance to improve upon a vanilla, sugary, buttery cookie fragrance that you already have, then you might want to give this one a shot. Okay, now on this one, I want a touch of color. So we're gonna go with 1 drop of cream, really try to make it look like eggnog. Now, there is a possibility that this 1 drop of cream is going to be too much for the amount of wax we're using, but I can't really do less. So let's just keep our fingers crossed that it comes out all right. Yeah, this will look good. Might be actually the perfect color. Go ahead and add our fragrance. Yeah, this is definitely my favorite bakery fragrance of this set. All right, let's talk about this vanilla eggnog. Now, I was interested in this one because I don't really have a fragrance like it. I have been kind of looking for something sort of like this. Like I have, some snickerdoodles and some other sugar or spice type vanillas, but nothing, like I was kind of looking for something to replace those. And out of the bottle, I was encouraged and felt pretty optimistic about it because I really liked this fragrance out of the bottle. But I gotta say, this was one of the few that I actually liked less while it was burning than I did out of the bottle, because out of the bottle, it was a little bit more rich to me. I smelled more vanilla and also the spice, nutmeg, or whatever else is going on in there. But when it was burning, I really only smelled more spice than I did the vanilla. The vanilla was still there, but not as strong. And so this comes down to personal preference. If you're looking for more vanilla, you're gonna like other vanilla fragrances better. If you're looking for something that's less vanilla, less sweet, but more spice, then you might actually really like this one. And so I'm still kind of debating on whether or not I would be interested in something like this in my line. The hot throw was pretty good on this. The color was great on it as well. Although if I could go a little bit lighter, I would. And if I was making a larger batch with more wax, then I could have gone lighter. And overall, I'd probably give this a 3.5 out of 5. I would say it's a little bit above average because it's a good scent. It's not necessarily my personal favorite, but I think it was a good scent with good hot throw. And when you have that, in my opinion, you're going to be at least a little above average. Okay, last but not least, we have Woodland Snow. I know I'm going to like this already because it sounds more like a winter fragrance, and I like woodsy fragrances, outdoor fragrances, so I'm sure I'm going to like this one. Yes, very much so. So it has that those woodsy notes, of course, and then it has almost like a chill to it. It's sort of hard to describe. Let me see what CandleScience says and see if I can elaborate on that. So yeah, it has camphor, cypress, cedar, sage, a little bit of incense and spice, also a little bit of eucalyptus to try to mimic a crisp, cool air. And it's very accurate. It is crisp, winter, cold air, like in the mountains and around the woods. I think it's a really good fragrance. This is my favorite fragrance of this batch, at least prior to testing. But again, this is also in the wheelhouse of fragrances that I personally just really, really enjoy. So I'm a little biased on that because this is the kind I like. All right, let's get our wax. Okay, a couple things here. I actually went a tad higher on the wax because I think 9% might be a little too much. It's just a very strong fragrance. So I'm gonna go a tad lower, more like an 8.5% fragrance load. Plus, to be honest, I just want to fill these up a little bit taller on one of these just to see how everything looks. As far as the color goes, I could certainly cop out and not dye this at all and just go with the easy route, natural colored white. I mean, after all, it would make sense. It's called Woodland Snow. But I want a blue. We've got a good assortment of colors here, and I want to go with a blue, and I want to make it look like a crisp, cool air. So I'm going to add 1 drop of the Summer Breeze. Now, I could have went with straight blue or this kind of cooler blue, and that's the one I'm going to go for because I think one drop of regular blue will be a little bit too much. I want to go with a very light frosty icicle color. So we'll use the one drop and call it good. And it still looks good. It actually looks very similar to a candle I made recently on another recent video. All right, let's clip up these final two candles. Woodland Snow by far was my favorite out of the bottle, by far. It was complex, it was high quality, it felt sophisticated. So yeah, out of the bottle, this was my number one. While burning, it wasn't as strong as I expected it to be, but it was still good. In fact, I actually used a tad less oil in this one. I think I did a 1% lower or 0.5% lower on this one than I did the others because I expected this to be pretty strong because out of the bottle, that's what I was anticipating. And so now I wish I wouldn't have done that. Sort of reminds me of CandleScience's Alpine Blossom that they released last winter, and maybe mixed with a little bit of frosted juniper, which is also, I think, fairly new for CandleScience. This one is similar to those other two in the sense that they have the pine, the balsam, the eucalyptus, but that addition of mint made this one a little bit different than the others, and I do enjoy it. I really did like this fragrance. Like I said, out of the bottle, it was my favorite. However, I would say this is probably number 2 or 3 after burning these because black cardamom and cream jumped to the top for me out of these, but this is still a good scent. It's still complex. It's very interesting. It's unique. I think a lot of people will really like this one still. So I would definitely still give this one a thumbs up. I also really like the color, that very light blue that I went with, and really any kind of light blue or green or even natural color, I think would have been a great choice for this. Anything that just makes you think of fresh winter air. The overall, I'd give this about a 3.5. I can't really give it a 4 just because I was a little disappointed burning versus out of the bottle, which is not common. Usually it's the other way around, but I wouldn't be mad if someone gave this a 4. So anything between a 3 and a 4 I think is appropriate for this. I want to give it a little extra boost because I think it is a good, complex, balanced, unique fragrance. But I think a 3.5 is probably about right for this one. If I was judging straight off out of the bottle, though, I would have gave this a 4, 4.5, maybe even a 5. So, and maybe that's unfair, and maybe that's what's making me bring it down a tad. But anyways, those are my overall thoughts on these. If I had to pick a favorite, like I said, it would be the black cardamom and cream, which I was not expecting to be the case. I just really enjoyed that one. Overall, the wicking was pretty good across the board on these, as I mentioned earlier. I really enjoyed playing with the colors as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this style of reviewing fragrance oils because I don't like to just sit and talk about what they smell like. To me, that's not entertaining to me. That doesn't keep my own interest and my own attention. So I want to mix it up for you guys as well. So I hope you guys enjoy watching, making some of these test candles, experimenting with colors, and then really testing the fragrances out of the bottle as well as once they've been burning. So in the comments, let me know a couple things. 1, do you like this format of the reviews better than what I've done in the past where I make them all and then I talk about them all at the end? 2, which of these interests you the most? And then I guess 2B is if you've already tested some of these and you've already received these oils and you're using them, which do you like best and why? With that being said, thank you all for watching this. Thank you CandleScience for sending me these scents for review on the channel. And of course, I always provide my honest, true feedback after testing these. I hope you guys appreciate that, and I will see you all next time.